All right, I gotta tell you about something that like blows my mind. It's just crazy when you think about it. Kind of frustrating, maddening, etc. Take your pick. I'll keep it quick and concise here. So like one of the reasons that they keep giving for the tariffs, right, is that they want to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Now, there's a lot of debate, not even really, about how that's not going to happen and how these tariffs wouldn't cause manufacturing to suddenly return to the United States, and definitely not at the rate that a lot of them want us to go back to, which is kind of like what we saw in the 1950s or 1960s. Like 30% of employment was in manufacturing. Um, but that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is just that basic question of like wanting manufacturing jobs. Um, and when you ask yourself, like, why do we want manufacturing jobs? It's really like simple question, right? But like, it's kind of like taken as a given that we want manufacturing jobs. And why? Why do we want manufacturing jobs? Well, the reason that is given is, manufacturing jobs are the sort of jobs that historically have been able to support a family. One man in this construct, one man can feed and house and save money for a family with just that one manufacturing job, right? Like they're able to provide for their family with that kind of a job. But it's not like that job, a manufacturing job, is just by virtue of being a manufacturing job, the only kind of job that can support a family. And it's kind of crazy that's like the belief that pervades all of this kind of discussion, that so much chaos and so much politic is done around this idea that like we have to have these manufacturing jobs because they're the only jobs that can provide a decent standard of living for a working class family without requiring an education. Um, and they're not. They're just not. And the only reason why manufacturing jobs are like that historically, or have been able to do that historically, is because of unions. Um, and it's just lined up in history that we had a more robust labor movement in the United States at the same time as we were developing all this manufacturing capacity, and that we were the only country in the world that wasn't like decimated by World War II. So we had this opportunity, and we were just right place, right time to develop all of this manufacturing capacity while we had a relatively strong, compared to now, um, labor movement and culture. But it's organized labor that made manufacturing the sort of job that could support a family and that had all these benefits and retirement and paid well and all these things. It's all just because of organized labor. If you have organized labor in all the rest of the sectors, you could have the same thing. There's no reason why we have to have manufacturing jobs. And on top of that, the United States is primarily a country that our economy centers around services. At least our labor centers around services. And I think a lot of times people think about services, they think about it in the context of like service workers when you think about a restaurant, like serving. But it's not that. It includes being a server at a restaurant is a service job, but service, it includes things like being a nurse or being a doctor or a teacher, or those are all service jobs. And that's all the service industry in the larger like economics context. So you have goods, which are the manufacture or creation of like a tangible object, right? Like something that in most cases, when you purchase it, you own it and you take it with you, and it's not perishable necessarily in the sense that you can like, you don't have to consume it, use it, have it right then and there. And it doesn't really require that you have an interaction with the person. Whereas services are usually intangible. It's usually something that you get right then and there, and that you can't like take the thing with you and go somewhere. And that's really the difference between the two. And so the United States has a very robust economy of services jobs, and you don't necessarily have to be educated to work a service job. And most importantly, and this is I think the biggest thing, services jobs tend to pay better and are better just in general, better jobs than manufacturing jobs. It'd be better to have a job in services than it would be to have a job in manufacturing. I mean, better on your body, better hours, just in general, a better job. And if we had the same labor culture, organized labor culture, union culture that we had in the 50s and 60s, as we do, if we had that now, and if we had that within all of these service jobs, those would all be jobs that you could afford to buy a house, afford to send kids to college, afford to, have just one person working if that's something that you wanted to do. Like, you could do all that with services jobs. The missing component here is organized labor. And it's hilarious because that's what one of the main things that the Republican Party is actively fighting against all the time is organized labor. But that is what made manufacturing jobs so great. And so it drives me nuts because there's just all this effort to bring these manufacturing jobs, these much desired, much vaunted manufacturing jobs, as if just because they're manufacturing jobs, they're desirable. Do you want to work in a factory? I don't want to work in a factory. You know what I mean? Like, we'll never go back to that. That will never come back. It's similar to back in the 2010s, there was all this trying to bring back coal conversation. You're never bringing back manufacturing at the level that it was at, in our nostalgic, past. That literally will never happen. There are arguments for why you want to have more manufacturing capacity in the United States, but the thing is that technology has driven most of those manufacturing jobs out of existence. And so you can have more manufacturing capacity in the United States, but that is factories owned and operated by the owners of capital, not big plants that are, employing thousands of people and creating all these great jobs. It's some skilled workers and mostly robotics, and that's only going to increase. That's not going to decrease. So it really does drive me nuts because we don't ever stop, and this is one of the things that I've been trying to focus on, and what I want to really have us all talking about more is like the why, and like the why of our political conversations and discourse. Like, we take it as a given that we want manufacturing jobs, and no one stops to be like, do we want manufacturing jobs? Why do we want manufacturing jobs? What is the thing that we're trying to accomplish with these manufacturing jobs? And it's pitched as these great jobs for the worker. It doesn't have to be the only great job for the worker. We can instead have all the jobs that we have now and make those jobs better with organized labor, and cut out all of this bullshit and tariffing and just not that I'm totally opposed to tariffs, but just like we can cut out all of the hullabaloo around manufacturing jobs by just making the jobs that we have now better and organizing our labor. That's it. It sounds like it's a small task, but that's it. We don't have to do all the rest of this shit. We stop ourselves on the decision tree back at why do we want these jobs and what are we trying to accomplish? A decent standard of living, we can accomplish that a million more efficient ways than bringing back manufacturing jobs.
Really what I was doing, which is the exact thing I was complaining about in the video, is thinking about factories and manufacturing like in terms of the 19th and 20th century versus the 21st century. Obviously, working in a factory is much different than what I think a lot of people have in their minds. You probably know that better than most, or at least better than I do. So yeah, the apologies there because you're right. As far as your confidence that you'd make more money than somebody in the service industry, I'm glad you're confident about that, but you are wrong about that. And I'll explain why. And I think that this gets to what I'm talking about, like really precisely, which is, first of all, service sector jobs pay more than manufacturing jobs, and I'll break that down a little bit here. But it's about like the breadth of what a service industry job is. So we'll talk about the different buckets of how they kind of talk about this in labor statistics. So you have four types of jobs. You have agriculture, you have private services, which is what we're talking about here. You have goods producing, and you have government jobs. Most labor data is going to exclude agriculture, but just note those are the four kind of like big buckets. So for goods producing, you have things like mining and logging. You have like construction, and then you have manufacturing and a couple other things, but those are like your kind of like your big ones. Essentially, you're creating a thing, and then you know within manufacturing you have durable or non-durable goods, and there's like little kind of subsects within each one, right? And then within services, you have a huge array of things. And so it's kind of unfair of me to compare services to manufacturing, because manufacturing is one part of a larger umbrella, right? Whereas services is the umbrella, and you have to kind of dig into that to get to these other, subsections. But I mean, we're talking everything from nurses, doctors, lawyers, janitors, you name it, accountants, call center employees, teachers. I mean, it's a huge chunk of employment in the United States. It's the majority of employment in the United States. So that's one thing. And then what you said about like, if you excluded doctors and lawyers essentially, but I think you were talking about what we kind of think of as like white collar jobs. Then you'd be confident that you make more than your average services employee. I don't know why you would exclude those, but let's just say like, if you're thinking about service employees as being restaurant workers, which is the hospitality industry, there are about as many people working in manufacturing as there are people working in hospitality. The numbers are, and I had to pull these up, and I'm going to share the stuff on the screen here too. But you're looking at, pardon me, about 16 million, actually it was 17 million people in hospitality. And then for manufacturing, it's a little bit lower. It's about 12 million. So, a difference of about 5 million people. But hospitality is not the largest segment of the overall services industry. The largest segment is healthcare. So if you were going to exclude things like doctors, nurses, things like that from this broader topic of services, you would be excluding the plurality of those people who work those jobs. Services jobs, as I'm talking about, that's what I kind of mean, is that this is a way bigger portion of the overall economy than manufacturing, and these are jobs that generally pay better than manufacturing. And then just to kind of put a finer point on that, so they do private education and health services together, are kind of like the statistic point, and you're looking at almost 27 million people in those industries. And if you add together what you have for manufacturing and for hospitality, then you end up with about the amount of people who work in health services and private education. So it's a lot. And services in general is just a huge section of the economy, of labor in general in the United States. But as far as who gets paid more and kind of the data on that, that's even clearer. So for manufacturing, you have kind of two groups. You have the durable goods and you have non-durable goods. And then as of March 2025, for durable goods, you are looking at about, and this is obviously, these are averages. Your average hourly wage for somebody in manufacturing of durable goods is $30.62. For non-durable goods, it is $26.28. So decent wages, right? But your overall manufacturing is $28.92. That's for both types of manufacturing. Whereas private sector services, your average hourly wage is $30.71. So on average, services make more money than manufacturing. Now, obviously, services, that number is weighed down significantly by two categories, one being retail and the other being hospitality. And as you kind of were alluding to, and those are much lower paying jobs. So leisure and hospitality, your average hourly wage is about $20. And for retail, your average hourly wage is $21. So much lower, right? By like what, $7 lower than your hourly rate for non-durable goods. So a pretty substantial difference. But if you were to exclude those, then your number for the services sector skyrockets. And I don't have that in front of me. I'd have to do a bunch of math. And I'm just pulling data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I don't want to sit here and add all this stuff up. So, but yeah, you're talking a much higher amount. And as I said, retail and hospitality are not even the majority of service sector jobs. They're not the majority of employment. They're not even a plurality of the service sector jobs. So this is the misconception. And I'll restate what I said in the original video, because I've kind of been all over the place talking numbers and whatnot here. But on average, a service sector job is a better job than a manufacturing job. It pays better at the very least. Often will have better benefits. And one of the reasons why manufacturing jobs were so good, and still are, is because of unions. But there's been a pretty sharp decline in the number of unions, the number of people who are employed in a job for which there is a union available and that they are members of a union paying dues, etc. Those numbers have gone down pretty significantly in the United States over the last 20 years, 30 years. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I won't get into that in this video, but it's pretty significant. And it tracks along with a decline in the general wages of somebody in manufacturing. So manufacturing is less of a good job now as it was 20 years ago to 50 years ago, right? Which is part of what I was saying in the video. As we think about manufacturing in terms of what it used to be, not really what it is now. And again, a lot of that goes back to unions. And so my original point in that video is we can make these service industry jobs better, and people can still reap lots of benefit from them. They can make good money, and they can have good benefits, and they can have, a lot of the things that we look for in a job, meaning you can do things that you care about, that you're passionate about, whatever that is, while not having to bring more manufacturing jobs to the United States. It's not that manufacturing jobs in and of themselves are better jobs, are more valuable jobs, pay better just by virtue of being manufacturing jobs. And actually quite the opposite. They don't pay as well as service sector jobs.